Welcome to Picks with the Professor, NFL edition, week 14. I'm reminded of the scene in Anchorman where Veronica does the news, and Steve Carell's character is like, "You're not Ron."
Yeah.
I feel like people looking at this should be like, "You're not Jake."
Yeah.
Cousin Jared hopping in.
Yeah.
Talk NFL for the first and maybe only time, maybe not. I mean, like, who knows? Like maybe Jake, has some other plans during a week later on like a Tuesday and Wednesday night, and you have to do it again. Who knows, right? I don't know his life.
Yeah. I mean, there's a first time for everything. There's also always a last time for everything. And so
sometimes a second time for everything. Sometimes not.
Right? Yes. Kind of more so who's to say? It's unlikely that I can improve upon what has been done on this show so far.
Yeah.
I'm just here to kind of keep things going and not screw anything up.
Yep. That is your job is, just keep the car going, keep the train moving along. As you can see on screen, A grade sides with a 26% ROI. Cousin Jared, we had a 14% ROI on our 3 A grade sides last week, and the season-long ROI decreased because that's what happens when you've been wrecking shop like we have. Overall, sides have been great for us. Totals have been only 1 and 2 last week, unfortunately, but still a 16% ROI on the totals that we've covered here on this show or over on TikTok/Instagram. Again, the links for that are in the show description. I post those out on Twitter as well, and I drop those links in either the Discord or on Dub Club. So they should be getting out to everybody, all those extra totals that we do. So yeah, again, your job just to kind of keep things rolling. And of course, we've teased it. We've talked about it on multiple other shows. But the reason why you're here is that last game, Army Navy, to talk about one. Because we'll have to figure out.
Can't pass up the opportunity to talk about America.
For sure. And obviously, again, our gratitude to those at Army and Navy playing football and basketball and other sports that they're doing. And then they, or even if they're not playing sports and go on to serve our country. So our gratitude towards them, because obviously that's something that I could not do personally.
Nope.
But we've got 5 NFL games covered before that, because we have to figure out a bowl schedule, what we're going to do for that. I don't know exactly between the YouTube shows and Dub Club what we're going to do for college football. We'll have to
and the driving factor behind that is going to be, when do we feel like we're going to know who's playing and who's not? Because that's the most important thing for these bowls.
It really is, and we have a player-based model here, and that's part of the reason why we've been so successful in the NFL, is being able to know. I mean, there's even injuries on day one, unfortunately, and saying who's there and who's not, and that helps us, navigate what are tricky waters for most people. What was tricky waters for me personally before I created the model. I wasn't able to just look at this and be profitable betting the NFL until I built the model. And of course, that player-based model for college football coming in handy for opt-out season. We may not do any college football shows. I don't know if we will or not. We will. I've mentioned this to our people on Dub Club, though. We will be updating the probabilities, the projections, and making the official picks 24 to 48 hours ahead of time once we know who's playing and who's not, other than a few exceptions. And that's where we may do one show where we're kind of like, these are the ones we feel the best about. We've already locked in one pick for our people over on Dub Club that I was like, we just got to lock this one in. So we'll see how that goes. So maybe this will be our last college football talking of the season. Maybe not. We don't know. But over on Dub Club, we'll have a pick and a projection again on every single bowl game. But right now, we're here to talk about the NFL, of course. But before we do, a reminder, if you want to get all that action on Dub Club, you can sign up. The link in the show description, whether it's this one or the other shows, always get you $5 off your first month. QR code there on screen if you're with us on YouTube and want to scan. And again, you lock in the current pricing. Some of you aren't watching college basketball. You're here and you watch baseball. Lock in the current pricing for all of next year and beyond, rather than the prices going up. So you'll want to take advantage of that this month. And if you're going to do it this month, you might as well just do it now and get in on all the bowl information, all the NFL stuff, and all the college basketball stuff. But again, here to talk about week 14 of the NFL. Rams and Ravens starting off. Ravens, according to Sideline, the third best team right now. Cowboys being second, looking really good. But of course, the 49ers just running away with number one, the way that they have been playing after that little, skid they had, playing, being healthy now and looking.
That helped so many good players, and they're all healthy. Yes.
They have a lot of good players, and they're all healthy. That definitely bodes well for them. Who knows if they'll be in the same form come February, but for right now, they look pretty good. But the Ravens should be the best team in the AFC, an AFC that's gotten a little bit wide open. Miami's had some struggles. Buffalo's had obviously a lot of struggles. The Jaguars and Texans are kind of there, but probably not the best teams in the AFC. Wide open AFC, the Ravens, according to Sideline, the team to beat, though. Model says average margin of victory in this game for the Ravens is 10. And so we're going to lay 7 with Baltimore. It's a C grade pick. Cousin Jared, this is right on the borderline of where we would take money line or lay the points. As we've always talked about, there's no perfect right answer. Every situation's, a little bit different. We try to have rules and guidelines because I just don't want to make decisions, especially with college basketball. On a Saturday, I don't want to have to go through each one and say which one would I want. So I'm just coding in something specifically. But we come here on the show and talk about specific games. We can kind of talk about which one we like more or less. I don't necessarily mind laying some odds if the math justifies it. This is one where I don't mind laying the points because West Coast team traveling to the East Coast early time slot just doesn't typically do well. It doesn't always happen that way, but they tend to struggle. You even saw it a little bit last week with the Chargers going to the Patriots and struggling. They covered, but they also only scored 6 points.
Yeah.
So in this one, we're going to lay the 7 with Baltimore. It's only a C grade pick with regards to value according to the model, but it's definitely one that's going to be in my portfolio in some way, shape, or form. Because Jared, what do you got?
Yeah, you mentioned the West Coast team coming east. Always like that spot for the East Coast team, for sure. The other thing I would say, Ravens coming off of a bye here, had a week to get a little bit rested up, get a little bit of extra time to prepare for the Rams. The Rams, last time they played, looking great against the Browns. Of course, sans, decent quarterback for the Browns, but putting up 36 points on the Browns defense, nothing to scoff at all. But I feel like if there's anything that we have learned with the NFL is that as soon as you think a team's good, they will be brought back to earth. And that goes for just about any team who's not one of the very tip-top teams. And the Rams sneaking up those rankings, but still not one of the tip-top teams here. The other thing, and when I saw this matchup, it kind of reminded me of the Lions game, where the Lions came into Baltimore earlier in the season, got a lot of hype around that one. The Ravens wiped the floor with them. And then similarly, the Seahawks, you talked about West Coast team going east, the Seahawks going into Baltimore and also thoroughly getting waxed in that game. So I just think that this is a real tough spot for the Rams, coming off that big win against the Browns, but having to go on the road, go to the opposite coast against a team that's just coming off a bye. Lay the 7 points here with Baltimore, people.
We often talk about, all models are wrong. Some models are useful. And again, we think we've got a pretty useful model here. But we talk about margins of error. The 49ers are so far out in front. One could argue that they are outside of the margin of error for being the best team in the NFL. If there's no margin of error, that could include anybody else. They are the best.
Yeah.
But in the NFL, you tend to think about tiers of teams. And, 2 through 5 are reasonably close. 2 through 5 are all within a field goal. Then there is more than a field goal gap to number 6. But then 6 through 13 are all within a field goal. And that's where the Rams fall in this category. And so there's a real tier difference between these two teams. And that's, I kind of think what matters when you look at the NFL is, like you said, the Rams are sneaking up. The Rams are sneaking up because, who else is it? The Eagles are winning, but they haven't looked good. They're in this 6 through 13. The Texans, they definitely still have their warts, though. The Chiefs, offense has really struggled. And then last week, their defense struggled a little bit. The Packers maybe are climbing up in that. The Lions are still probably good, but they haven't looked as good. So it's like this 6 through 13 are the teams that are like, okay, I think you're good, but also like, I don't know 100%. And the Rams have gotten up into that tier now, but like they could fall right back out of it because that's the sort of stuff that's happened with the NFL. The teams who've been in the 6 through 13 type tier, it's not been the same teams all year. There's been some teams coming up and down into it.
Yeah, and see, great for you, viewer, because you're going to get like all of my NFL hot takes in like 45 minutes that I've been sitting on all season. You said, did you say like 6 through 14, 8 through 14? What was the range?
6 through 13.
Okay, 6 through 13. Dang, I was going to say, you want to know who's right there on the precipice of that? Denver. And after the way that Denver started the season, giving up a billion points, the Dolphins are still scoring points in that game.
Yeah,
and like that just shows you how. The middle to bottom of the NFL this season has just been crazy. I mean, Denver was probably 29th, 30th, something like that.
Yeah.
And now all the way back up to 14th. So,
14th. That's what I was going to say. If the Rams get crushed here, like I think you're going to flip them for Denver in this tier. And then they may get crushed and fall right back out because that's just been the way the way the NFL is, right? It's not like it's just this year. It's just, now that we've had this specific model, we can kind of see how this model handles it and does it. But yeah, there's only a field goal gap between these teams, and the Rams they're good, but traveling West Coast to East Coast against one of those teams in that second tier, 2 through 5, which are the teams that we think firmly are the best teams in football behind the 49ers, can create a tier mismatch. And that's when you want to lay the points here. So Baltimore -7 C grade, again, only a C grade value according to the model, but one I really like having. And another one like that, Carolina and New Orleans. We've been down on this Panthers team all season. They're up to number 31 mainly because Washington is down to 32 because the model's like, okay, Washington's going to do something. And they're like, no, we're going to be like 20 points worse than that. And then the next week we're like, the model's like, okay, they're going to do something. And they're like 20 points worse than that. And they just keep doing that. So at some point, like, what do you do? Right. It's the opposite it's the opposite problem we have with Penn State football, where it's like, they keep crushing teams. You have to move them up. Like, even if I know they aren't the best team, like what do you do when they keep covering by a bunch, right? Washington's the opposite of that. But so Carolina up to number 31. Carolina's still fighting hard, I guess. I mean, they covered last week against Tampa Bay, only losing by 3, or they pushed the closing number. The week before they missed out on the cover by 4 or 5 points. I mean, they're at least, still playing. The issue, of course, with them is this is a quarterback-driven league, and Sideline still has Bryce Young as the 32nd best starting quarterback. And of course, there are only 32 teams. And so that doesn't make for the worst offense in football because they do have a couple of other pieces there, but it makes for not a good one. The defense at number 23, again, as we talked about all season with them, the defense is probably slightly better than that, but when they're constantly on the field, constantly in bad situations, it's just easier to make mistakes. And so what are you going to do, right? They are giving up points in situations that they probably shouldn't because their offense is so bad. And so it kind of is a downward spiral for them. New Orleans, not much better, but still better. And we're expecting Derek Carr not to play in this one. I have him listed as doubtful. This is what I've inputted in. It sounds like it's going to be Jameis Winston. It is a downgrade. It's not the biggest downgrade. Sideline still says New Orleans wins 71% of the time. I just, at this point, want to fade Carolina every time I can on the road. New Orleans has a pretty good home field advantage. Rookie quarterback, terrible quarterback on the road. I mean, it doesn't seem like a situation where he's going to have some success. So at this point, just sign me up for as much fading of Carolina as we can. Let's try to ride this cash cow as long as we can. Because what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree. So first of all, you talked about Jameis Winston not being too much of a downgrade from Derek Carr. I think Jameis Winston, turnover prone. But if there's anybody who's just as likely to throw a back-breaking interception in the red zone, it is also Derek Carr. And so I am not sure that is a big downgrade to your point. The Carolina thing. Carolina's bad. Bryce Young is bad, which makes me sad as somebody who was a great college quarterback there. I hate to see him go to the NFL and struggle. But I would recommend anybody go read the article on The Athletic this week that talked about what some of the stuff that may have been going on in Carolina's locker room this season. And it was just not a good situation. It was described as like the Hunger Games with the the owner trying to micromanage the team. And then there being the other coaches getting the idea that, hey, this wasn't going to last very long. So I want to be on the owner's good side here. And some of the other coaches then texting the owner behind the head coach's back. And anyway, it's just a bad situation. Carolina's not good. The situation in Carolina, I would say, even with Reich being fired, still not good. Not a good situation in the locker room. New Orleans, one of the few places, in my opinion, where home field still really matters. Crowd's always really good there in New Orleans. Bryce Young has had a rough season. He has been sacked 44 times. He's probably going to be sacked a few more times in this game. And I don't think this is a spot where Carolina can kind of get things rolling again. Not in New Orleans with, our boy not showing much improvement at quarterback. So wish that Bryce was doing better, but I think it may kind of maybe is what it is for this season.
Yeah. I think it is for this season. And I want to caution people on not, try not to have too dumb a takes out there, right? Like he may always be a terrible quarterback. He may not, right? We don't know. He wouldn't be the first quarterback ever to struggle in his first years. I try to say that a lot.
Yeah.
That I don't know if this was the worst trade in NFL history. It might go down that way. That is on the table, especially considering, that they not only gave away what they did, but then they took the wrong quarterback because CJ Stroud looks like the real deal. The quarterback, and I talk about Malcolm Gladwell, who's a brilliant author and a guy I love reading and listening to. And he's talked a lot about the quarterback problem in the NFL, that there's like no way to figure it out, that we've tried all these variables, all these metrics, everything. Like we just can't figure it out. Like it's just such a different game that the job you're being prepared for, we don't know. And so, right. It's not to say, that's, I think, the argument for why the Patriots have been so good for so long. Partially Brady, but partially just being like, we don't know what's going to happen in the draft. So let's trade down and get more shots on goal. Right. And that's the argument for that strategy is picking a quarterback's impossible. Like, don't mortgage your future for a gamble, and that sort of thing. But all that to say, right, we don't necessarily know. I hear a lot of hot takes out there. What we know this year is that he's terrible. And that's really all that matters for us betting it. And maybe he gets better later. Maybe he doesn't. We'll figure it out then. But for now, it's not good. And on the road in this environment, it does not bode well. Because, this may be a really low scoring game. And I think now is a good time to talk about the Thursday night game, which is also supposed to be a low scoring game. The total in this one's 30, which for an NFL game or college game, I guess it doesn't really matter. That's wild to have a total of 30. That's not weather impacted. The total in Jacksonville, Cleveland is 30.5, but we are expecting some nasty weather there. Like it may be just sloshed, wet, windy. The total for the Texans game, which we're talking about next, is 33, and we're expecting really high winds, potentially, maybe a bunch of rain as well. We don't really know, but like you've got weather spots there. The total for New England Pittsburgh is 30 without weather. The weather's going to be fine in Pittsburgh here on Thursday night. So I just have to ask you how excited you are as a person who loves unders, loves sicko football. I mean, you loved Iowa, Nebraska. So how excited are you for New England, Pittsburgh in a total of 30?
New England has sapped any joy out of an under. I mean, that is just awful. I mean, it is truly, truly awful. Even you like Iowa because it's like, what's Iowa's defense going to do to carry the day today? What crazy special teams play are we going to see? And I can't believe I'm saying this about a Bill Belichick team, but like you got nothing. I mean, you got nothing from New England. And so like they were even like some of the defenses when, I don't know, 10 years ago, I don't know when it was, when it seemed like New England was just getting like a special teams touchdown or a defensive touchdown like every week, which it seems like they did for, every other year for a decade. It's just nothing pleasant, like nothing pleasant. And Pittsburgh somehow 7-5, maybe one of the most unpleasant 7-5 teams that I have ever seen. That is just going to be like, if there is a game that screams Thursday night football, it is New England and Pittsburgh. These two teams. Yeah.
I think the fact that something has happened to take the joy out of an under from you,
it's saying something.
It speaks volumes. 1 p.m. Eastern, Texans at the Jets. I mean, Cousin Jared, I've got the Texans here at number 6. Again, as we talked about earlier, and I kind of set the stage for this, right? It's 6th, pretty far behind number 5, and barely ahead of 13. It's within a field goal there. So to say the Texans are 6th is not to say that they are necessarily the sixth best team. They are just barely in top of the tier of teams that are 6 through 13, which I think is pretty reasonable. Whether they're 6 or 8 or 12, they're one of the better teams in football. The model likes their defense. The model likes their offense. I mean, there's just not much not to like about this Houston team other than the fact that they're playing too many close games. But they perform well seemingly week in and week out. Losing Tank Dell is going to hurt, but it just seems with that offense, they just find a new receiver every week, as crazy as that sounds. And, I've been preaching all season this Texans team, almost from week 1, that this team was actually pretty good. So I feel like I've got a pretty good seat on the bandwagon. There's still space. There's still space left. The seats are getting pretty rough far to the back, but there's still space on this Texans bandwagon. Cousin Jared, we're backing him again here, minus 190, A grade pick. The Jets defense is good. The offense isn't. And now we're back to Zach Wilson, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So, seeing that Houston's offense, you have rated a 108, not surprising. Seeing Houston's defense rated an 86, basically this exact same as the Jets, who everybody, I feel like, obviously because of their ineptitude on offense, has a lot of respect for what the Jets do defensively. Don't feel like Houston gets that much attention for their defense. It's all about CJ Stroud, and rightfully so, but it's almost like the head coach in Houston was a defense coordinator for a great defense and, was one of the best defensive players in Houston Texans, franchise history. So,
and not only that, was such a good defensive coordinator that before he became a head coach, there were a lot of people in the NFL being like, this guy's going to be a great head coach. Like,
yeah. It's almost like some things are easy. Great. A lot of respect for Houston. I mean, obviously the amount of faith I have in CJ Stroud is leaps and bounds higher than what I have in Zach Wilson. And at what point can we just say that, is it possible that Zach Wilson is the most emotionally tough person in the world? Yes, it is possible that he is that. But on the off chance he's not, how many times can we yo-yo back and forth with somebody like this, where it's you're the starter, you're not the starter, we're signing Aaron Rodgers, wait, now you're the starter again, now you're not the starter, but now you're the starter again, but nothing's changed. I just we have a large enough sample size now to say, I do not think this is going to be the week that Zach Wilson turns it around. I love Houston, but I will also admit I am irrationally in on this Texans team. So they have been so good to us this season. I just have a lot of faith in them, more faith than they probably deserve, but I just have so much faith in them and absolutely zero faith. The Jets, I have 0.5% more faith than I have in the New England offense, if that tells you anything. So
it's and you mentioned, not being the week you think that Zach Wilson figures it out. And I would say specifically against a Texans defense that the model has had a great read on. And viewer, you may be sitting there saying, how in the world are the Texans the fifth best defense? Again, I would argue maybe the difference between some of these defenses is a little closer than you think, and it's that tier thing. I haven't looked into enough to know that, but here's what I will say is that going back to week 10, I'm just going to kind of compare what the model projected and what the Texans allowed to kind of show you the model's been just spot on this defense. And in week 10, it projected they would allow 25.7 points to Cincinnati. They allowed 27. I mean, being off by 1.3 is pretty good.
Yeah.
In week 11, it projected they would allow 20.3 points to the Cardinals. They allowed 16. So they actually did better, not by a lot, but better.
Yeah.
Week 12, it projected they would allow 23.9 points to the Jaguars. They allowed 24. I mean, that's about as spot on as you could get. And then last week against Denver projected 20.1 and they allowed 17. So the model's been either spot on or they've done better. That's why the model has them up this high. It's saying, basically, it's rewarding them, saying you're doing exactly what we expect or better. And so I don't know. The model here says that they should allow a grand total of, I moved away from it here. 12.7 points to the Jets. And so
take it to
why
the
would
bank.
we doubt it?
Yeah. Take it to the bank.
And honestly, like 12.7, you're like, hey, doesn't that seem right?
Yeah.
Like with the Jets offense.
It does seem right. Yeah.
There is some potential weather. Mentioned that, the model is keeping an eye on that, and the model does know about the weather. And this one's more one to keep an eye on. I think a couple of the other spots are more we know the weather's gonna be bad. This one it's probably gonna be windy, and if anything, it's gonna not help Zach Wilson even more. It might be really sloppy wet, so that's something else to keep an eye on here with this weather. But either way, Houston minus 190, A grade value. They've been good to us so far all the season, and the market just isn't catching up to the fact this Texans team is for real, which is surprising considering how good of a story they are. How much hype they're getting, but yet here we are. To the afternoon slot, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, Buffalo and Kansas City. Bills, good, better than their record. I think if you looked at any advanced metric, everybody knows that. I don't really think it was Ken Dorsey's fault necessarily. I think it was just some bad turnover luck, some bad timing. There have been people who chronicle it better than I can, the bad luck that the Bills had. So they're still a very good team. The Chiefs still a good team. At this point now, the offense and defense grading out pretty similar, which again is crazy to say, but the Chiefs defense has made just a heck of a turnaround here. The offense last week looked better than the defense, but that's been not really the trend. You can see the pace there. The Chiefs have been a little bit below average. The pace in the NFL, unless you're at the extremes, doesn't really matter too much. The model says this should be a pretty run-of-the-mill game, that the Chiefs defense is good enough to slow down this Bills offense, and that the Bills defense is very good and can slow down this Chiefs offense. There's nothing to see here. Average number of points in a football game in the NFL's in the 43, 44 range, so 42.8. This total's 49.5. I don't quite know why it's so high. So we're going to go under that number of 48.5. I might have typed in the wrong number there. 48.5, 49.5. 48's your key number. And so that's what we want to make sure we get in on the under there. Cousin Jared, the thing that I wanted to, and I'll update the banner here for us to make sure it's all on the right page here, under 48.5. The thing that I wanted to point out about this game is 2 weeks ago, we faded the Chiefs and had the under. Last week, we faded the Chiefs and had the under. And that's been a mixed bag. I think both unders, missed by under 6 points. And the reason I know that is because the last 2 weeks, I have teased the team playing the Chiefs and the under, and it's won both of these weeks because I believe there's a little bit of a correlation here. I believe that makes the teaser a little more valuable. And in both times, I was getting through some key numbers on the side. Teasing totals is not necessarily something you want to do all the time. You really want to pick your spots if you're doing it. And the reason I'm doing it with the side here is specifically because I think there's a correlation there. It's the same reason you would parlay a total and a side, is you think there's a correlation there and you're getting an extra mathematical benefit. I'm doing the same thing this weekend in this game, teasing the Bills and the Chiefs again, partially because I can get the Bills through 3 and through 7, and I can get the Chiefs total through 51, 52. And if you do a 7-point teaser, if you really feel like it, through 55. But the bottom line here is that I just think there's a correlation with the market not quite realizing just how good this Chiefs defense is. And in this case, just how good the Bills defense is. And so I think that this is going to be a little bit lower of a scoring game than people realize. I like the under 48.5, the better of all the picks. But as I've been doing previously, this teaser, has been working. So just kind of sharing my thoughts there for the viewer. Cousin Jared, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So my thoughts are really, this kind of boils down to one thing for me. The Kansas City unders hit at a 55% clip last season. They have so far this season hit at a 66% clip. But more interestingly, Kansas City is second in the NFL for basically how much they've missed their lines by. Their projected totals, their average miss is 7.5 points under. They are just tenths of a point behind another team who has gone even further under their projected totals. I will give you one guess as to who that other team is.
I'm going to guess it's the Bills.
No, it's New England.
Well.
So that is the company that Kansas City is.
Sorry, you should have given me two because we were playing the Bills. That was the obvious one, right? But yes, the Patriots make sense. Since two, and we talked about the Patriots earlier, I just wanted to add one comment. It seems like Belichick is like going service academy offense, which is fitting with the Army Navy game being in in Foxborough this weekend, where he's like, we're going to run 39 seconds off the play clock every single time. And we are going to really just minimize how many plays this game has, because fewer plays and random variations, the only way we're going to win a football game.
Yeah.
And so, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So New England and Kansas City are both around 7.5 points below what the books have set. No other teams are above 5. So it is Kansas City and New England down there by themselves. I think that you just cannot overstate the impact that Patrick Mahomes and in this game specifically, Josh Allen, the effect that those names have on the total. Like, are books really, really good at their jobs? Yes. But there are sometimes in some of these really high profile sports, Lakers in basketball, Yankees in baseball, name quarterbacks in the NFL, like sometimes they are just off a little bit just because of the name and the books knowing they'll can set a line somewhere and they're still going to get action one way or the other. I think this is just too high for what we've seen from both of these teams this season.
And Red, I want to discuss a little bit here, something related to what you're talking about. And I don't want to get too in the weeds. There are probably other shows who can do it better than we can that know the ins and outs. But one of the points about where you find value in different sports has to do with in which sports does the public have a say or not? In which sports are the limits high enough where there's just so much money ratioed wise and influence from, because as much as we want to say the books don't care about the money and they just want to make the right line, to some extent, they do have to keep an eye on. They cannot just claim we're making the right line and have 70-30 splits, because that's just a liability that their bosses are going to be a little bit concerned with. Right. And knowing about that money and everything and the ins and outs of that. And there's a whole science that people looked at that, and we don't have to know all the ins and outs of that, rather than we can just kind of observe it and just say, well, it doesn't really matter why. It doesn't really matter if it has to do with the books knowing what people will do or knowing how much money or whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. We just identify it and find the value and bet the better side, right? That's going to win 6 out of 10 times or whatever it may be, right? In that situation. And so again, there are a lot of reasons potentially why, but this, whether it's the Chiefs offense getting too much respect or the Chiefs defense getting not enough respect, or in this case, I think it's probably a little bit of both, because the Chiefs offense has definitely taken a step back with Kelsey being the only weapon on offense. We've seen that. We've talked about that, in the Chiefs defense stepping up in a big way and really making up for that and keeping the Chiefs relevant in the AFC race, despite all those offensive struggles, has been because the defense has really picked up the slack whenever the offense hasn't. Yeah. And so those, combinations and what the books are looking at, all that's made for the perfect melting pot. The last 2 weeks, again, the Chiefs games have gone over by 1 score, but I don't really think that's enough to make us worry about this. I still think there's value in this under, and I still think people are sleeping on this Bills defense, which is really good. Obviously the Bills offense is good, but they're going to be going up against a good defense as well. So some good defense that people are missing. Under 48.5, really good pick, and 48 being your key number.
Yeah. And I mean, any time that you can work Ken Dorsey into the conversation, in my opinion, the quarterback of the most talented college football team of all time, the 2001 Miami Hurricanes, that had Clinton Portis, Willis McGahee, Frank Gore, Andre Johnson, Jeremy Shockey, Kellen Winslow, Bryant McKinney, Jerome McDougal, Vince Wilfork, Jonathan Vilma, DJ Williams, Philip Buchanan.
Now you're going on some defensive players, so
and
just said offensive, but
well, no, sorry, I meant just the most talented team of all time, and I just went down the list of some of the NFL players. That wasn't even all the NFL players. And the thing is, you could go back a year before that, and you have Santana Moss and Reggie Wayne on the team, and you go like forward a year, and you pick up some other like Sean Taylor. So anyway, just very talented team. Ken Dorsey, severely underrated.
Monday Night Football, Green Bay and New York. We do have a pick for our people on Dub Club on the Sunday night game. So again, if you're interested in that, make sure you're with us over there. But to the one of the two Monday night contests is another week where we get two of them at the same time. Green Bay and the Giants. Green Bay, again, as we talked about, one of those teams that's up in that tier. They've looked really good lately. And I think maybe the way that they beat the Lions was probably more about the Lions, but the fact that they beat them and of course, Kansas City and yeah, you get that there was, definitely a missed pass interference at the end of that game. There was also kind of a terrible call the other way on the late hit on Mahomes. I mean, there were two really bad calls. I know the pass interference would have cost more yards, but even if you ignore that last drive, I mean, from what I saw, Green Bay looked like the better team. I mean, they looked really good. And so I don't think you can deny that the Giants aren't good. The defense is still playing okay. We are still expecting DeVito to start, but Tyrod Taylor will be around and dressed up. Maybe he gets into some action or not. Green Bay's favored. They should be favored, but it's on the road. Laying points there, laying odds there. Tough, taking the Giants stuff. I think this is a really tough one to peg with regards to the side. I think the market has done a really good job of pricing it. From the side where I think they've missed is the total. The model projects 38.7. So we're going to go over 36. 38 would be your key number here. Maybe even 37 would be a key number. That could definitely happen with the right number of scoring. It's exactly 744, which is the most common NFL total. So 37, 38, your key numbers here, going over 36 makes a lot of sense for a Giants team that randomly scores sometimes and a Green Bay team that seems like they could score now on anybody. So why not? Not that this game will get high scoring, but I think the books are overreacting here on this total, going too low. Weather seems fine. And so good weather. Let's go over 36. Because Jared, what are your thoughts on this Monday night matchup?
I don't know if the books have adjusted enough for these two teams as of recent. The Green Bay has gone over in 3 of their last 4 games. Prior to that, they got under 4 in a row. I think a lot of that has to do with Jordan Love finally starting to kind of come into his own, starting to play really well.
Slash them letting him, right? I think it's a combination of both, right? It's a little bit of like taking the reins off, a little bit him stepping up. And it's one of those like cyclical good things, right? Where it's like he plays a little better. The coaches trust him a little bit more. He plays a little bit better. The coaches trust him a little bit more, right? And it's looked a whole different. It's been a whole different offense to watch from going back to early in the season.
Yeah. And so I really like his development as of recent. If I'm in the NFC, like that's definitely like one team that I would be concerned about going into the playoffs. I think Green Bay could get hot, and then however the seeding plays out, going to Green Bay never fun in the playoffs if they ended up hosting a game. So I don't think that they've quite caught up to how good Jordan Love has been playing as of recent. And the other thing I would say is that the Giants somehow managed to go under in 8 straight games at one point in the middle of the season. They have since gone over in 2 of their 3 games. The one they didn't, their last one against the Patriots, which that's understandable based on what we have seen with the Patriots. That is definitely it's not me, it's you situation. If I'm Bill Belichick telling other teams about you can't go over, it's not me. It's not you, it's me. Yeah. I'm keeping you from going over this total. Yeah. I think also importantly that the Giants had a bye coming into this game. All I'm asking, Giants coaching staff, who did such a great job last season with the Giants, in my opinion, and Daniel Jones, scheme me up like 1 touchdown drive in the first quarter. You've had your bye. You've had plenty of time to prepare.
That first drive, that scripted drive.
Yes, that scripted drive. Yes, that's all I'm asking for. Give me some points out of that first scripted drive, and I think that we are set up for success in this game. I do feel like, and of course, DeVito still starting. Coaches made the decision, it sounds like, to continue to have him start, even though Tyrod Taylor is probably going to be available for this game. I hope that means they've seen something with him and that they have confidence that they can. I mean, I am of the opinion that, Tyrod Taylor would be starting if they thought it gave him the best chance to win. And so I think that they think DeVito gives them the best chance to win. I think the growth of those young quarterbacks can be good. Again, I'm asking for like 3 points or a touchdown on that first scripted drive, get off to a good foot. And I like what I've seen from Green Bay enough the past few weeks to get us over this number of 36.
And DeVito's been, in my opinion, serviceable, and I've been touting that from after the first week that he played, that the biggest issue I thought with DeVito was the coaches just being like, you're not going to throw it past the line of scrimmage and we're just going to run it 45 times. Right. But he's actually not been bad. He's not good, but I mean, he's actually been better according to the model than, Will Levis, Aiden McConnell, Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ritter, obviously Bryce Young, Mitch Trubisky, Billy Zappi, Mac Jones. I mean, there's a decent list of quarterbacks that the model is saying like he's been better than, and he's still a below average quarterback. Like, don't get me wrong. But again, it's a situation where he's been serviceable enough that you think he can put up some points. And that's, again, we're not asking him to get 40 points. We're just asking him to put up, 14 or something, 24-14 gets us to 38. And I think you're right. I like, your point there that maybe the coaches have seen enough from him. And again, the model has to let the reins off a little bit and say he's, can be serviceable. And I have to assume Tyrod Taylor's on a 1-year deal. A guy like him probably is. But if you feel like you've got a decent, competent backup, it does behoove you to let him play and see what you got in him and see if he could be a young, cheap backup for you. Obviously, Daniel Jones will be the guy when he comes back. But, it makes sense if you like that to see what you got. And it seems like he's been, again, okay. A very serviceable backup.
Definitely
better than a bunch of quarterbacks in the league, and not a guy that's going to lead you anywhere. But obviously, Danny Jones may not be the guy anyway, so I don't know if it really matters at that point. But the reason, a viewer that you may be here, the reason that Cousin Jared's here, Army and Navy, Saturday at 3 p.m. First off, and we sent the projection out for Dub Club. I had not indicated it was a neutral field, so the probability is a little bit different on that one. This game's being played in Foxborough, so it'll be a new place for both and travel for both. The model projects, 40 points or something, and the total in this game is 27.5, 28, 28.5, depending on your book, shopping around and what sort of juice you might want to, you're comfortable laying. I think it's the biggest thing to start with because Jared is the total that the model says 40. What are your thoughts on the total?
You could not pay me to go over in this game. This has like 14 to 12. I don't know. Make up numbers. 16 to 13. I don't know. This has.
Can someone score pie?
It's possible. Iowa can. I don't know if these two teams can.
True.
But
it's true.
There's no way. Like there is no way that this game goes over. And Army specifically, like Army experimented with a little bit more, I don't want to say wide open. I don't know what the right word is, but Army experimented with a little bit of a different offense this season that might lend itself to scoring a few more points. Then they had the loss to UMass and they were like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should just go back to doing what we've been really good at doing for such a long time. And I think after that loss to UMass, they didn't take a snap from shotgun the rest of the season after that. That's my way of saying this is lining up to just be the regular Army-Navy game. Army tried
3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Yes. Army tried something different. And after losing to UMass, they're like, nah, I'm good. So everybody's doing the same thing that they've been doing for the past handful of years, which has resulted in all of those scores that I just mentioned, like 12 to 10. So, not going over in this game. I know what Sideline says. Sideline's very useful. I don't think it's useful for this Army-Navy game in regards to the total.
And of course, that UMass loss came the week after they got drubbed 62-0 on LSU, and LSU defense that's taken its licking, of course. And we expected Army to be able to put up a few points. I don't think we thought they'd win, but put up a few points against that defense. And I watched part of that game, at least the first quarter or so, and they were trying things from shotgun, and they just couldn't get anything going. And like you said, you could be forgive at that point for thinking that it's still an SEC defense, and we stepped up in weight class and whatnot. But the UMass thing was a game changer. Then, of course, going, kind of back to the conventional standard, they beat Air Force, which again, Air Force has just fallen off a cliff as of late.
Yeah.
But that win allows them now, if they win this game, they win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, of course, which is a big deal. My concern for Army, the next week they only beat Holy Cross 17-14, but they came back the next week and beat Coastal Carolina 28-21, a Coastal team who's looked pretty good even without Grace McCall. So two better performances doing that. And only the one kind of stinker. What I will say about the total is we talk about the ins and outs of the modeling. There's a very good chance that, the model needs, it doesn't have a specific variable looking historically at these service academy games. And, it looks at the run percentage of a team and it looks at the number of plays run in a game, and those are relatively correlated, right? These two teams don't run a lot of plays. And then it looks at the quality of the players offensively and defensively to come up with a total. And it could just be that with service academy games, it's just missing an extra thing. And it does have an interaction effect on if one team plays slow and the other team plays slow, we're dealing with an area that doesn't have a ton of data.
Yep.
And I'm always leery of people will say, well, going back 20 years, I'm like, I just don't know if the data from 20 years ago is relevant to today.
Right.
It may be in these games, but again, we just have to be very careful. That's one of the jobs of a statistician. One of the things I've been extensively trained in is trying to figure out, when do we use data, what's signal and what's noise? And the answer to that question, 9 times out of 10, when you think it's signal, it's not, it's noise. And that's the hard part for people to understand. Is this one of the 10 that it is signal? I mean, probably. There is something about this, right? And so it's something, I want to look into, but it only affects 3 games a year. So it hasn't been the highest thing on my priority list because there's so many things I want to add. But yes, this is one where I would take the total, and I'm not saying I would. I don't think it means a lot. What I will say is this game absolutely could go over via a number of ways. One of them is overtime.
Yep.
This type of game could not have a lot of field goals, could easily be 7-7 going to overtime. And then you're going, oh my gosh, holy breath. I'm pretty sure we played the under in one of these service academy games in the last year and a half, and it only went over because of overtime.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's on the table. Because there might not be a lot of field goals, touchdowns make you have points faster, especially if you got 27.5, this game could be 21-7. That'd be 4 scores. That is possible, right?
Yep.
Obviously this game could easily be 10-7.
Yep.
And that's the thing is if it's 10-7 late, you're betting the total is just too risky of a proposition either way, over or under for me. Because if it's 10-7 late, if the team that has 7 kicks a field goal and it's 10-10, you're very nervous about the total at that point if you went under, but you haven't got it 1 if you had the over either. So, and you need that field goal to get you the overtime. All that to say, this is one of the 3 games a year where I would take the total from the model and say, I don't know if it's going to help us. I don't really think I'm going to blindly play that. And we've talked about not blindly playing totals in football also because of, the fact that a game plan can change week to week as opposed to college basketball and baseball where it is what it is. You don't typically change your game plan because you got 3 days to prep for college basketball. You're going to do what you're going to do. And you may try to tweak a few things, but it's not going to change that much. And baseball, there's no there's no time. So there's no pace component, right? But football being a little bit of a different animal, weather, et cetera. We've talked about not blindly playing total. So we're not blindly playing this one. We're passing on the total. The side, Army at 60% to win. Cousin Jordan, when I look at this game from the side standpoint, what I see are 3 not good units and 1 terrible unit. That's where the model sees the difference between these 2 teams and why Army's getting that extra 10% from a 50-50 game. Because these academy games, you should just start with 50-50 as your baseline and then adjust from there. But I mean, keep it close to 50-50 because these games, who the heck knows what's going to happen. But the biggest change that the model is seeing is Navy's offense is just not good. And so my perspective would be lean Army. Just be careful the price we're laying, 60%, the break-even points -150. Just don't want to be playing anything higher than that. This one, the line movement's going to be interesting. If I think people are going to want to play this game Saturday, if you're a college football bettor, if you're a football bettor, Saturday, you got some FCS teams, but there's not many of them. And how many of those have you watched? How many you know about? People are going to say, I've watched this team, I know this team's, and money's going to start coming in. But where's it going to come in? Is it going to go in one or the other? If people start backing Army, I feel like, and that number gets out to minus 160, I think you just got to pass. I just don't think there's going to be any value on it. But if for whatever reason people are like, who the heck knows, coin toss game, and they start betting Navy, and you can get a minus 130, Army might be worth a look at a price like minus 130, minus 135, right?
Yep. Army is clearly the better team this season, in my opinion. And when you look at the teams that Navy had success against this season, you see two types of teams. You saw they beat North Texas and UAB, where basically Navy was able to defeat them in a clash of styles. UAB and North Texas, two of the faster teams, more wide open offenses. Not Army is where I'm going with this. The other two teams that Navy beat this season was Charlotte and East Carolina, which I can guarantee you, Charlotte and East Carolina, much worse offense than Army. And so I just don't see anything from Navy this year. Again, this game, 50-50, like very flip of the coin type thing. But I cannot in good conscience tell you with any realistic from anything I've seen this year that Navy is going to win this game. Like Army has been much better in almost every single facet of football this year than Navy has been.
Yeah. And that, of course, and I feel like I want to make sure I succinctly summarize what you just said there, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Basically, I think what you're trying to say is, sports are weird. Anything can happen. It's a service academy game. Anything can happen. So we, on the one hand, we can hold two thoughts in our brains at the same time. We are advanced enough beings to do that, to say this is the type of game that can be a toss up. On the other hand, I know one team is better than the other. And so with that being said, I don't want to lay too big of odds or a price, because I know the toss-up-y nature of these contests with these service academies when they get together on the field. But also knowing that Army's the better team, it just makes it where it's Army or pass type thing, where I just can't be on Navy, because while it's a coin toss setup, Army's just the better team. And so it's I don't want people to think it's contradictory. It's just we can kind of hold some different thoughts. And that's kind of why we, at this point, would say we don't have an official pick on this game. We would lean Army, be thinking about the price. We don't want to pay too big of a price, but if we're playing it, it's Army or pass is kind of the way we're going. Because we're definitely passing on the total, because 28 is too low to go under, but you just can't go over either. It's you see these service academy games and you think it's under or pass. Well, the model would say over or pass. Well, the intersection of that is pass, right? And this one you would say, don't play too big of odds any direction, because I don't think anybody really saw Army beating Air Force. That was such a surprise. Right. That's what happens with these service academy games. So be careful with the odds you're laying, but that doesn't mean you always take plus odds, because one team is better than the other and it's a neutral field. So there's no home field edge, of course. So obviously, if you're a transitive property person, you like Army in this game. Reminder, that's not really predictive. That doesn't mean Army won't win. It just means that's not really a good line of reasoning, unfortunately, as much as we would like it to be. But again, really the only way we would play this game is Army. But again, looking for more like a minus 130, that's where I'm starting to get a little bit interested. Maybe minus 135 is the highest I would be thinking. And right now that number's not out there in the market. We'll see if it gets available. But again, as always, even though college football season is winding down, you can join us on Dub Club for all of the bowl picks, and you can join us there for the remainder of the NFL picks. There's that QR code for you again one last time. Cousin Jared, you made it through your first ever NFL show.
I did. I do feel like a sense of accomplishment, and I also feel like a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders.
Yeah, that seems fair. All right. Well, again, as always, more picks over on Dub Club. Get over there if you're not already. Lock in the current year pricing before it goes up come the new year. Otherwise, though, this weekend with all your football betting, best of luck.